Okay, hi again. It's Friday, and we are on to the next lesson in our unit on survival of living things. And today we're going to talk about inherited traits. You'll remember in our last lesson, we touched a little bit on that, maybe one or two sentences in the book that we read. Remember, excuse me, in the last lesson, we talked about how animals help their offspring survive. And you'll remember that we said offspring are an animal's young or a child or children of a person, okay? And we said that the way that they do that is to provide shelter, it's to feed them, to teach them survival skills, and to protect them, okay? We also had to take note that not all animals help, protect, feed, or teach their young to survive. An example of that that I think I used maybe more than once was the butterfly. The female butterfly lays her eggs and then she flies off into the sunset. The eggs hatch and they continue to care for themselves. All right. Now, today's lesson is on inherited traits. Okay. And the big question for us today are, what are inherited traits? That's the guiding question for today's lesson. What are inherited traits? So as we go through the lesson, that's what we want to be listening for. That's what we want to be thinking about. That's a big word, Mrs. Maria. What does that word inherited mean? And what does inherited traits mean? So our learning targets for today, only one. We can explain that plants and animals can be similar to, but not exactly like their parents. That might have to do with inherited traits. Let's see. And so Karen Jones has written a book for us to learn just exactly what inherited traits are. Misty, the yellow lab, is about to have puppies. Which picture shows one of Misty's puppies? And how do you know? Well, if you guessed this one, you would be correct. And then the second question is, how do you know? Well, if you look at Misty's ears, these are similar to that, okay? Her coloring is a pale white yellow, and so is this puppy's, okay? The shape of the eyes is another thing, all right? So we can pretty much say that this is Misty's puppy. If we look at this one, this puppy doesn't have any similarity to the Misty the yellow lab, okay? She's not yellow, she's brown, and she's got a little bit of black, and she's got a little bit of white, okay? Her eyes are not shaped the same, all right? So we can tell that Misty's puppy is this one here. All right. When living things reproduce, they create offspring. Remember, we said reproduce was to create offspring that eventually grow to look like their parents. As they grow, they usually develop similar coloring, coverings, and similar body features. These features are called traits. Okay, so traits are coloring, covering, similar body features, okay? And those features are called traits. Let's think about some traits of this young female Mexican violet-tear hummingbird. What kind of body part does she use to eat her food? My guess would be she uses her beak to eat her food. Does she have legs or a tail? Seems to me she has a tail. Yes, she has some feet, but no legs. Is she covered in scale, fur, or feathers? Well, if I look, she's in feathers. What color is she? She's a lot of colors. She's got some blue, she's got some green, she's got some white, there's even some gray in there. What else do you notice about her? Well, I notice that she has a black eye, and that she has 2 feet. She has a tail, and she has wings. All right, the young hummingbird has traits that are similar to her parents. Okay, so here's her parent, and here's the young. What do you notice that's similar? Okay, so what I noticed that are similar are her coloring. Okay, she's got the blue and the greens and the grays. I noticed that she has a beak like her parent. I noticed that she's got a big eye like her parent. I see wings back here and a tail back there. And I see that she has feathers, not fur, okay, not scales, but feathers. The feature that makes her look like her mother, like her parent, I'm sorry, are called inherited traits. Inherited traits are features of a living thing that have been passed down from parents. So there, my friends, are what inherited traits are. Inherited traits are features of a living thing that have been passed down by their parent, okay? Inherited traits are features of a living thing that have been passed down from their parents. So if your mom has blue eyes and you have blue eyes, then that's an inherited trait. That's something that's been passed down from your mom to you, okay? If you have blonde hair and your dad has blonde hair, that's an inherited trait, okay? That's a feature of your dad, who's a living thing that has been passed down to you. All living things inherit traits from their parents. This is why the offspring of plants and animals eventually look like their parents. Which cub is the offspring of this male lion? Well, I would say it's this one. And how do we know? Because they both are similar in color, okay? They both have kind of slanted eyes, all right? And this one definitely does not belong to him because he has stripes. The parent, the male lion, does not have any stripes. While the lion cub does not exactly look like his father, he will eventually grow and develop many of the same features. He will grow in size. He's going to grow a long mane that surrounds his face, and he will develop a hairy tuft up here at, around his head, as well as he'll have a hairy tuft back there at the end of his tail. All living things inherit traits from their parents, which affect how they look and behave. You may have inherited your dad's brown eyes. It looks like all of these children inherited their dad and mom's brown eyes. You may inherit your mom's curly hair. You may inherit your parents' skin coloring or nose shape. Inherited traits are similar to, but not exactly like those of their parents. Your face may look similar to your mom's or your dad's, but it doesn't look exactly like your mom and dad's. The baby giraffe inherited many of its parents' traits, including long legs, a long neck, body shape, and skin pattern. The baby does not look exactly like its parents, though. This is because traits that are inherited are similar, but not exact copies. So similar means they're somewhat alike, but they're not exactly alike. Like animals, plants also inherit traits of their parents. Like animals, the inherited traits of plants are similar, but not exact copies of their parents. This happens because there are variations. And what that is a fancy word for slight differences in each living thing when it is reproduced, okay? So when we have reproduction, all right, there are slight variations, slight differences in each one of us. These carrots were all grown from seeds produced by one carrot plant. They all have similar shapes, okay? They all have similar shapes, but each are slightly different in their size and their texture, okay? This one, it's a little bit smaller and fatter than this one here that's a little bit longer and skinnier. And this one is bumpy, that's what they're talking about, texture, and this one appears to be a little bit smoother, all right? Their stems have leaves that are similar, but not exactly the same size or same. Variations exist in living things of the same species. So these are all carrots, but there's all, which means they're the same species, but they're all a little bit different one from the other. Many characteristics of plants and animals are inherited from their parents. The way they look, their body coverings, and body parts are just some of the traits that are inherited. Your inherited traits are what makes you who you are. So the question is, what are inherited traits? What I remember hearing that inherited traits were, they're features of a living thing. That can be a person, an animal, or a plant that have been passed down from their parents. Those are things like their body parts, their body coverings, their coloring, their behaviors. Okay, and here we have a parent and an offspring. Okay, so let's look at their body parts. Okay, they're similar because they both have webbed feet. Okay, they both have wings. Okay, they both have beaks. Right? They both have fur or feathers, all right? Now, so their body parts are similar. Their body covering is similar, okay? Their coloring is similar, right? And I don't know about their behaviors because we really don't know what they're doing. However, I notice with the offspring, the beak is a little bit different than the parents, okay? And the eye is a little bit darker than the parents. The parent seems to have a little bit more white in their body covering than the offspring does. So even though there are some features of the offspring that are similar to the parents, they're not exactly alike. As a matter of fact, that offspring looks a little bit chubbier than its mom or dad, whichever that is. Okay? What traits are similar? What traits are different? We just talked about that. Now, you are going to use this at the end of the lesson in your workbook there, and I have attached the picture to your lesson so that you will also be able to look at it when you're working alone. And there's a worksheet that asks you, what are some traits that this boy inherited from his dad? So after the lesson, you're going to look at the picture that's attached in your LMS lesson. You're going to look for features, whether it's their eye, their hair, their smile. You're going to look for features that the young man has inherited from his dad. Okay, and you will fill that out up here. What are some traits that the boy inherited from his dad? And again, we want to use the question to answer the question. Some traits that the boy inherited from his dad are da 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 da. And then you'll come down here and you'll answer your 3 quick check questions. And so it says, we can explain that plants and animals can be similar to, but not exactly alike. So let's go ahead and once again, I'm gonna shut this down just like I did in our lesson from yesterday. And I'm going to move my chart over here that we can see and work on this together. And my anchor chart, as you'll see in a minute, says right. What are inherited traits? We already talked about this a little bit. I don't know how well you can see it. Maybe if I turn the light on, I turned it off for a minute. Let me turn the light back on and we'll see if we can see it any better. It says, inherited traits are features of a living thing that have been passed down from their parents. I don't know if it's any better. But that's okay. Inherited traits are features of living things that have been passed down from their parents. And those things are things like body parts, body covering, colors, and behaviors. Okay, so when we talk about body parts, that might be their arms. It could be their legs. It could be their beaks. Okay, and when we talk about body coverings, that could be feathers. Okay, it could be fur. It could be scales. Okay, so body parts that they could be similar would be their arms, their legs, their beak. Body coverings that might be similar or inherited are feathers, fur, and scales. Coloring could be white, could be black, could be brown. In the hummingbird and the penguins, we saw blue. Okay, and we saw some green. Right? So inherited traits are features of a living thing that have been passed down from their parents. Things like body parts, which could be arms, legs, or beaks. Body covering, which could be feathers, fur, or scale. Coloring, white, black, brown, blue, green, maybe even some red. Okay, and then the other thing is behavior. And those all go back to what we learned in lesson 2. Those could be how they move or how they grow. Okay, or how they change or how they reproduce. All right, so again, inherited traits are features of a living thing that have been passed down from their parents. You have inherited traits. You have features, okay, that have been passed down to you from your parents. And those would be things like body parts, okay? You don't have beaks, but you have arms and legs, okay? You have eyes, maybe your eyes or your nose or your ears might, or your hands might look similar to your mom or dad. Body covering, okay? Now you don't have fur or feathers or scale, but it could be your hair, okay? Coloring, are you pale, fair-skinned like your mom or your dad, or are you dark-skinned like your mom or your dad? Do you have freckles? Do you not have freckles? Things that are traits from your mom or dad that would you all have those because mom and dad have passed them down on you. Behaviors, how, and those could be, you might run like your mom or dad runs, okay? You might be growing like your mom or dad did. I know that my dad did not really start to grow until he graduated from high school. And one of my sons did the same thing. He really didn't gain his height till he had graduated from high school, while my other son started to grow a little bit taller and taller from 8th grade and kind of finished growing tall when he was a junior in high school. So these are just different traits. Probably the one who shut up like a weed was like his father, and the one that took his time was more like his mother, okay, or his mother's side of the family. How they change and how they reproduce. All right, so again, you're going to take a look at that slide that I've attached to your lesson. You're going to take a good look at that. And then in the activity book, you're going to go ahead and tell me what the young boy, what traits the young boy inherited from his dad, who's also in the picture. And then when you finish all of that and you turn in your work, you are going to have a great and awesome and relaxing weekend. And I'll see you back here on Monday. Have a great weekend, everybody.